The corridor was quiet, almost too quiet. Late evening sunlight spilled through the tall windows, casting long shadows on the polished floor. The air was warm, and a faint hum from the ventilation system made the silence feel heavier. Lila walked slowly, her heels clicking softly against the tile. She adjusted the strap of her bag, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. Today had been long endless meetings, papers to sign, and the constant hum of activity in the office. But now, in this empty corridor, she could feel the tension in her body easing, until she noticed him. He was leaning against the wall near the end of the hall, arms crossed, shoulders relaxed, yet radiating a presence that made it impossible to look away. His dark hair fell slightly over his forehead, and his eyes, catching the golden light, seemed to follow her every step. Lila. His voice was low, smooth, almost a whisper against the stillness of the corridor. She stopped mid-step, her pulse quickening. Jason. I didn't expect you here. He straightened, pushing off the wall. I could say the same about you, he said with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. There was something dangerous, something unspoken in the way he looked at her, like he had been waiting for this moment. The space between them felt charged, like the air itself had thickened. Lila could feel the warmth of her own skin, the way her breath hitched slightly whenever he moved even a fraction closer. She tried to shake it off. I was just heading to the elevator. Jason's hand brushed against the railing near her, stopping just inches from her own. There's no rush, he said, his voice softening. We have a few minutes. She swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how close he had gotten without her noticing. The hallway seemed smaller now, as if the walls themselves were leaning in, closing the distance. The faint scent of his cologne, something woodsy, a hint of spice, made her head spin. Lila's mind raced. She knew this tension wasn't new. The way he lingered near her desk, the subtle glances across the room, the way his presence made her heartbeat stumble. And yet, here it was again, undeniable and raw. Jason took a slow step forward. You've been avoiding me, he said, almost teasingly. But I can tell when you're thinking about me, even from across the office. Lila's cheeks burned. She tried to step back, but her heel caught the edge of the carpet, and she stumbled slightly. Instinctively, his hand shot out, steadying her wrist. The touch was brief, but it sent a shiver racing down her spine. You okay? He asked, his tone gentle now, but still carrying that underlying edge of something more, something electric. She nodded, though her voice came out weaker than she intended. Yeah. I'm fine. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. The corridor seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them, hearts beating a little too fast. Lila realized just how much she wanted to break the rules, to step closer, to let herself feel the pull she had been denying for weeks. But just as quickly, reality intruded: the office clock, the distant sound of voices, the awareness that anyone could appear at any moment. She took a deep breath and straightened. I should go, she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jason didn't move immediately. He watched her carefully, as if memorizing every detail. Then, with a slow, deliberate nod, he stepped back. Go, he said, but his eyes held a promise. We'll finish this later. Lila's heart was still pounding as she walked away, her bag heavier than usual. The corridor seemed colder now, empty and silent once more. But deep inside, she knew the heat between them was far from over. It had only just begun. The office was nearly empty now. Lila's heels echoed faintly as she crossed the main floor, her mind still tangled in the brief encounter in the corridor. She could feel Jason's eyes on her, even though he wasn't there. That lingering gaze was like a spark she couldn't ignore, one that set her nerves alight every time she remembered it. She settled into her chair, trying to focus on the stack of files in front of her, but her hands refused to cooperate. Every time she reached for a document, her mind drifted back to the corridor, his smirk, the brush of his hand, the way he had looked at her with something dangerous, something daring. A soft tap on the glass partition broke her thoughts. Lila looked up to see Jason leaning casually against the frame, holding a folder. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Her stomach flipped. Sure," she said, forcing a steady voice. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. He sat down slowly, keeping just enough distance to respect boundaries but not enough to calm the tension. The air between them felt thick, like a storm about to break. Lila could feel heat rising in her cheeks, a sensation that had nothing to do with the office temperature. Jason opened the folder but didn't look at the papers. Instead, he leaned back slightly, studying her. "You've been avoiding me all afternoon," he said, a teasing edge in his tone. Lila's hands trembled slightly as she set her pen down. I've just been busy," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. He raised an eyebrow, leaning closer, until the space between them felt charged with electricity. "Busy," he repeated. "Or, thinking about me?" Her breath caught. The way he said it, so low and deliberate, made it impossible to deny the truth. She looked down at the folder in her hands, pretending to study it, but the papers blurred under her gaze. Jason didn't move away. Instead, he reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. His fingers lingered for a fraction longer than necessary, and Lila felt a shiver race through her body. The warmth of his hand against her skin was distracting, irresistible. "You're aware, aren't you," he murmured, his lips almost brushing her ear, "that whatever this is, it's more than just a passing glance?" Lila swallowed hard, her heart pounding. I don't know what you mean." Jason's hand moved slightly, tracing the outline of her jaw with a teasing softness. "Don't play innocent, Lila. You feel it too." Her pulse quickened, and she could feel her own lips parting slightly, as if in response to him. She wanted to deny it, to pull back, but her body betrayed her. Every nerve ending seemed alive, attuned to his presence. Just then, the faint sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Lila's head snapped toward the door. Jason noticed immediately, a small smirk tugging at his lips. "See," he said softly, leaning back but keeping his eyes locked on hers. "We can't let anyone catch us like this." Lila's cheeks burned hotter, a mixture of frustration and anticipation building inside her. "Jason," she whispered, almost involuntarily. He leaned forward again, closer this time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Later," he said, his tone low, promising something unspoken. "When it's just us. I'll show you." The sound of the approaching footsteps grew louder. Lila straightened in her chair, attempting to appear calm, though her chest felt like it would burst. Jason leaned back, the teasing glint in his eyes making her weak at the knees. The corridor outside the glass was empty again. Whoever had been there had moved on. Lila let out a quiet sigh, grateful, but the tension didn't dissipate. It only deepened, simmering just beneath the surface. Jason closed the folder slowly, his fingers brushing hers in the process, sending another shock of warmth up her arm. You can't hide from this, he said quietly, almost to himself. And frankly, I don't want you to. Lila's breath hitched. She wanted to argue, to deny it, but she couldn't. The heat between them was undeniable, a silent current of longing that neither could escape. As Jason stood, he leaned slightly, close enough for her to feel the faint warmth of his body. We'll see each other later, he said, voice low and deliberate, before turning and walking away. Lila watched him go, her heart still racing. The files in front of her suddenly felt heavier, less important. Her thoughts were consumed by him, by the brush of his hand, by the unspoken promise in his eyes. The heat in the corridor hadn't ended, it had just moved inside her, setting her entire body alight with anticipation. And deep down, she knew there was no escaping it. The office had emptied almost completely now. Lila leaned back in her chair, staring at her computer screen, though she wasn't really seeing it. Her thoughts were consumed by Jason, by the way he had looked at her, by the way the air seemed to crackle when he was near. Even the simplest brush of his hand against hers had left her pulse racing. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Jason, still thinking about the corridor. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her heart hammering. She could feel a smile tugging at her lips even as her stomach twisted in anticipation. She typed back, maybe. Almost immediately, her phone buzzed again. Good. Then we're on the same page. Lila set her phone down, trembling slightly. The words were simple, but they carried an unspoken promise that made her knees weak. She glanced toward the corridor outside her office window. The sun was setting now, the golden light turning the glass panels into molten gold, shadows stretching across the floor. It was the perfect cover for secrets. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up to see Jason leaning casually against the frame, a small smile on his lips. "Working late?" he asked, though he didn't wait for an answer before stepping inside. "Trying to," she said, her voice tighter than she intended. She felt heat rising to her cheeks as he moved closer, his presence filling the small space. He set a small stack of papers on her desk, his hand brushing hers again. It was brief, almost accidental, but the effect was electric. Lila tried to focus on the papers, on the work in front of her, but her mind betrayed her. Jason's gaze held hers, steady and intense. "You can't pretend anymore," he said softly. "I see it in the way you look at me, the way you hesitate. You feel this too, don't you?" Lila swallowed, trying to speak, but her voice caught. I don't know," she said, though the lie tasted bitter even as she said it. He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Stop pretending," he whispered. "Stop running from it." Her breath hitched. The air between them was thick, charged, every heartbeat pounding louder than the last. Lila wanted to step back, to regain control, but she couldn't. Her body leaned toward him without her permission, drawn like a magnet. Jason reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered near her neck, and Lila felt a shiver travel down her spine. The warmth of his touch was maddening, stirring a desire she had tried to deny for weeks. "You know this can't stay like this," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "We can't ignore it any longer. Not here, not now, but soon." She looked up at him, searching his eyes. There was intensity there, yes, but also patience. He wasn't forcing her, he was letting her feel the pull, letting her decide. And yet, the anticipation was unbearable. The office clock ticked loudly in the silence. Every second stretched longer than the last, every breath heavier. Lila could feel her heartbeat in her throat, in her chest, in the tips of her fingers. Jason leaned even closer, his lips just a fraction away from her ear. "When no one is watching, when the corridor is empty, we'll see where this goes," he murmured. Lila closed her eyes briefly, letting herself imagine it. The heat between them, unspoken yet undeniable, made her tremble. She wanted to step closer, to let herself surrender to the tension that had been building for weeks. A knock on the office door startled her, and she jumped slightly. Jason straightened immediately, the small smirk returning to his lips. "See," he said, his tone teasing. "No interruptions now, but later," she nodded, her cheeks burning, her body still buzzing with the proximity of him. Jason gave her one last lingering look before stepping back, the promise in his eyes lingering even after he was gone. Lila sank back in her chair, her heart racing. The heat in the corridor wasn't just a fleeting moment anymore. It was a fire, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the right time to ignite. And deep down, she knew that when that moment came, neither of them would be able to resist it. The office was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Lila's fingers hovered over her keyboard, but she wasn't typing. Her thoughts were tangled with Jason, the lingering memory of his touch, the low promises in his voice. Every glance, every brush of hands in the corridor seemed to replay itself over and over in her mind. She pushed back from her desk and stood, needing to stretch, to move, to shake the tension that had rooted itself deep in her chest. As she walked toward the windows, she noticed movement at the far end of the corridor. Jason. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, the same teasing, confident smirk on his face. He hadn't seen her yet, and for a moment, Lila froze. Her pulse quickened. The air around him seemed to radiate warmth, filling the empty hallway with an invisible electricity that pulled her forward. Jason's eyes caught hers, and that smirk deepened. He stepped toward her, slow, deliberate, closing the distance without breaking the tension. Every step he took made Lila more aware of herself, more aware of the heat that had been simmering between them for weeks. "You shouldn't be walking alone at this hour," he said softly, his tone a mixture of teasing and something deeper. "I could say the same to you," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady, though the tremor in her words betrayed her. He stopped just a few feet away, the space between them charged, almost unbearable. "I can't stop thinking about you, Lila," he said quietly. "Even when I try." Her breath hitched. She wanted to speak, to deny it, but her voice failed her. Instead, she felt drawn to him, as if invisible threads were pulling them together. Jason reached out, brushing her hand lightly, his fingers lingering just a moment too long. Lila felt a shiver run through her body, the warmth spreading from her hand to her chest, to her stomach. The corridor around them seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them in this private world of anticipation. "You feel it too," he whispered, leaning slightly closer, his lips near her ear. "The heat, the tension, it's impossible to ignore." Lila's chest rose and fell rapidly. Her mind screamed to pull back, to regain control, but her body refused. She wanted to lean in, to close the distance, to let herself be vulnerable to the unspoken promise in his eyes. Jason's gaze softened for a moment, but the intensity never left. "I don't want to push you," he said. "But I can't hide how I feel." She swallowed hard, her lips parting slightly. I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then don't say anything," he replied, his voice low and commanding. "Just feel it." The tension stretched between them, electric and suffocating. Lila could feel the heat of him, the nearness that made every nerve in her body hum with awareness. Her mind was a whirlwind of desire and hesitation, longing and restraint. A soft sound from the far end of the corridor, the distant hum of the elevator, made them both snap their heads toward it. Jason's eyes lingered on hers, holding her gaze with a magnetic intensity. "Later," he said, his voice full of promise, "when no one is watching, we'll see where this leads." He stepped back slowly, giving her space but keeping the tension alive. Lila's knees felt weak as she watched him walk away, every step leaving her more aware of how much she wanted him, how much she had been denying herself. She leaned against the wall, her fingers pressed to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. The corridor, once empty and cold, now seemed to hum with the heat between them, a fire that neither could put out. Lila knew one thing with certainty: the moment Jason had promised, the moment when they were alone, was coming. And when it did, the tension, the anticipation, the heat they had been holding back, would finally ignite. The office lights had dimmed, leaving the corridors bathed in a soft, golden glow from the setting sun. Lila walked slowly, deliberately, toward the elevator, her mind restless with the thought of Jason. Every step echoed in the quiet hallway, and she could feel the heat in her body building with every heartbeat. She wasn't alone for long. At the far end of the corridor, Jason appeared, leaning casually against the wall. The moment their eyes met, the air seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken electricity. "Late night," he said softly, stepping closer, closing the distance just enough to make her pulse race. "Yes, trying to finish some work," Lila replied, though the words felt weak. She could feel the tension building between them, the heat she had tried to ignore all day now impossible to resist. Jason's gaze held hers, steady and unwavering. "I've been thinking about you all day," he admitted, his voice low, almost a whisper. "About this us." Lila swallowed hard, her chest tightening. "I've been thinking about it too," she whispered, almost afraid to say it out loud. The corridor felt smaller, more intimate. The walls seemed to close in, leaving only the two of them, suspended in a moment that was both thrilling and terrifying. Jason stepped even closer, and Lila felt the warmth of his body wash over her. She wanted to step back, to regain control, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked, his voice softer now, filled with quiet intensity. "The tension between us, the heat in the corridor." Lila's lips parted, her breath catching. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Jason smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made her pulse skip. "Then let's not pretend anymore," he said, reaching out to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered for a heartbeat, and Lila felt a shiver race down her spine. She took a shaky breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The anticipation, the longing, the desire, they were all too much to ignore. And yet, there was a softness in Jason's gaze, a gentleness that made her trust him, made her feel safe even in the heat of the moment. "I don't want to stop this," he whispered, his hand still near her face. "But we have to be careful." Lila nodded, understanding the risk but unable to pull away. "I don't care," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I just want this." Jason's smile widened slightly, though his eyes remained intense. He leaned just a fraction closer, and Lila could feel the warmth of his breath against her skin. The heat in the corridor seemed to pulse around them, wrapping them in its invisible embrace. For a moment, they simply stood there, inches apart, caught in the gravity of each other's presence. Every nerve in Lila's body hummed with anticipation. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat, her stomach, her fingertips. The world beyond the corridor had faded away, leaving only this charged, electric moment. Jason's hand finally reached for hers, intertwining their fingers. The contact sent a jolt through Lila, a mixture of excitement and relief. She squeezed his hand lightly, a silent acknowledgement of the connection they shared, the heat that had been simmering for weeks. "We'll have to wait," he murmured, his thumb brushing gently over hers. "But soon, when it's just us. I promise, it will be worth it." Lila's breath hitched, but she nodded. The promise alone was enough to make her knees weak, to send a thrill racing through her body. The heat in the corridor had reached a peak, a tension so electric that it felt almost tangible. Jason gave her one last lingering look before stepping back, his presence still palpable. Lila watched him go, her heart still racing, her body alive with anticipation. The corridor was quiet again, but the fire between them burned brighter than ever, waiting for the moment when they could finally be alone. And deep down, Lila knew that when that moment came, nothing would be able to stop the heat from consuming them both. The office was silent now, the hum of the ventilation the only sound. Lila lingered near the far end of the corridor, her heart still racing from the day's encounters. The sun had set, and the golden glow had faded into the soft shadows of evening. The corridor, usually so ordinary, felt charged, almost alive with the heat that lingered in the air. Jason appeared from around the corner, moving quietly, deliberately, his presence commanding attention even in the dim light. His eyes found hers immediately, and for a moment, the world outside the corridor didn't exist. "You're here," he said softly, closing the distance between them. There was no teasing now, only the quiet intensity that had been simmering all day. Lila swallowed, her hands slightly trembling. I wanted to wait," she admitted, her voice low. "I didn't want anyone to see us." Jason nodded, a small, approving smile tugging at his lips. "Good. Then it's just us," he said, his voice gentle but full of quiet fire. "No distractions. No interruptions." The space between them felt smaller now, intimate, every detail amplified the warmth of his presence, the subtle scent he carried, the way the shadows played across his face. Lila felt herself drawn in, the anticipation that had been building for days now threatening to overwhelm her. He reached out slowly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Lila's breath caught. The simple touch sent a jolt of warmth through her, a shiver that started in her fingertips and spread through her entire body. "I've been thinking about this, about you," he murmured, leaning closer, his gaze locked on hers. "Every day. Every moment. And now, we finally have a chance." Lila's chest rose and fell quickly. I've been thinking about it too," she whispered, barely audible. "I've been waiting for this." Jason's hand lingered near her cheek, gentle but deliberate. "Then let's not waste it," he said, his voice a low promise. He closed the distance just slightly, careful, respectful, but full of the intensity they had both been holding back. The corridor seemed to vanish around them. Time slowed. Every sound, every shadow, every heartbeat was focused on the space between them. Lila felt the warmth radiating from his body, the electricity of his gaze, the heat that had been simmering for weeks now threatening to ignite. Jason reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. The contact was simple, yet it carried all the longing, all the anticipation, all the desire that neither had been able to voice. Lila's pulse surged, and she squeezed his hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of the connection, the fire between them. "You have no idea how long I've wanted this," he whispered, his thumb brushing lightly over her knuckles. "And now, we have a moment to ourselves." Lila's lips curved into a small, nervous smile. "I've wanted it too," she admitted, her voice trembling with emotion. "More than I thought I could." Jason's smile softened, the intensity in his eyes tempered with warmth and care. "Then we'll take it slow," he said, his other hand lightly resting near hers, giving her a sense of closeness without overwhelming her. "We don't have to rush. Just, this moment. Just us." The heat in the corridor enveloped them, a quiet, simmering fire that was all-consuming yet gentle. Lila felt the tension that had been building for days begin to melt away, replaced with the thrilling awareness of being exactly where she wanted to be, close to him, connected, alive in a way she had never experienced before. They stood like that for a long moment, hands entwined, eyes locked, hearts racing in unison. The world beyond the corridor had faded entirely, leaving only the heat between them, the promise of what could come, and the quiet satisfaction of finally giving in to the tension that had been impossible to ignore. And as they finally stepped back, just slightly, to savor the lingering warmth and electricity, Lila knew that the fire between them had only begun. The heat in the corridor was far from over, it was only growing stronger, waiting for the perfect moment to ignite completely. The office was quiet, almost too quiet. The hum of the ventilation, the soft echo of distant footsteps, and the faint buzz of the emergency lights were the only sounds. Lila lingered near the far end of the corridor, her heart still racing from the private moment she had shared with Jason the night before. The heat in the corridor had left its mark on her, a lingering warmth that pulsed with every thought of him. She didn't have long to wait. From around the corner, Jason appeared, his dark eyes immediately locking on hers. There was a small, confident smile on his lips, but it was softened with warmth, a mixture of care and something more urgent, more alive. "You're still here," he said quietly, taking slow steps toward her. "I was hoping I'd find you." "I couldn't stop thinking," she admitted, her voice low. "About last night, about us." His smile deepened, but his eyes remained serious, intense. "Me too," he whispered. "I haven't been able to focus on anything else." The corridor felt different now. Shadows stretched long, painted golden by the early morning sun filtering through the windows. The air seemed heavier, warmer, as if the space itself was aware of the tension that had been simmering between them for days. Jason stepped closer, and this time there was no hesitation, no teasing distance. Lila felt the warmth radiating from him, and her pulse quickened. "Lila," he murmured, his hand brushing lightly against hers. The simple touch, gentle yet deliberate, made her shiver. She looked up into his eyes and saw everything she had been feeling reflected there, desire, longing, and a careful restraint that mirrored her own. "I've wanted this," she admitted softly. "For so long." He nodded, as if he had been waiting for her to speak those words. "So have I," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying a promise that made her knees weak. The corridor seemed to shrink around them. The polished floor, the distant office doors, the hum of the lights all disappeared, leaving only the space they occupied, the heat that had been building since their first accidental touch. Jason reached out fully this time, taking her hand in both of his, holding it gently. "Just us," he whispered. "No distractions, no one to interrupt." Just this moment. Lila's chest rose and fell rapidly. The anticipation that had been growing for days, the tension that had simmered through stolen glances and fleeting touches, now surged into a quiet, intense thrill. She nodded, squeezing his hands lightly, letting herself feel the warmth and reassurance of his presence. They took a slow step closer together, the space between them almost vanishing. Lila could feel his breath, soft and steady, brushing against her skin. Every nerve in her body hummed with awareness, every heartbeat echoing the one next to it. Jason's thumb brushed over hers, gently, almost hypnotically. "We've waited long enough," he murmured, leaning just slightly closer. "And I think, it's time we stopped pretending." Lila closed her eyes briefly, letting herself savor the moment, the anticipation, the heat that had been building for weeks. She opened them again and met his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm ready." He smiled, not the teasing smile of before, but one filled with quiet certainty. "Good," he said softly. "Because I've been ready since the moment I saw you in this corridor." For a long, suspended moment, they simply stood there, hands intertwined, hearts racing, fully aware of the connection that had been growing between them. The heat in the corridor, so long a simmering tension, had finally reached its peak. But it wasn't just desire, it was trust, care, and a quiet intimacy that neither had expected, yet both had craved. Jason gave her hand a gentle squeeze and stepped back slightly, just enough to let her breathe, just enough to let the moment linger. Lila smiled, feeling the warmth, the anticipation, the quiet satisfaction of finally giving in without fear or restraint. The corridor was still quiet, but the fire between them had ignited, uncontainable now, leaving both of them aware that this was only the beginning. And as they walked down the corridor together, side by side, hearts still racing, the world outside seemed distant, irrelevant. The heat in the corridor had brought them together, and now, nothing could undo the connection they had finally embraced.